Hello and welcome to the DrivingMaul Show here on New Zealand Sports Radio. Hi, I'm Paul, and I'm the guy behind DrivingMaul. I'm the founder of New Zealand Sports Radio, and we're going to have a chat tonight. We're going to talk about Super Rugby in all its different forms. We might even talk a little bit about club rugby as well, and wherever else the conversation really takes us. Because if you know anything about the way that John and I work, well, preparation isn't high up that list, let's be honest.
How do you spell that?
Yes, exactly. Off the cuff, I believe is how it's spelt.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things you might notice, folks, is we've changed the name of the show. Yes, we're no longer #Rugby Chat. It's now going to be called the DrivingMaul Show. After 140 odd episodes, I thought it was time to freshen things up. And also, we will be moving to Monday night from 8 p.m. next week as well. So all change here on New Zealand Sports Radio. And the reason for that is that we were supposed to be joined, or we were going to be joined tonight by a current international. But unfortunately, he's kind of busy with club training. John, it's great to see.
I'm not in. I don't play internationally anymore.
No, not anymore. Deary me.
So who's the other international you were that was going to join us?
Dwayne, who joined us last week, our Samoan, the Samoan scrum half, who also plays for the Utah Warriors in Major League Rugby, is back in New Zealand and is out at Pakuranga training with his club tonight. Otherwise, he would have been joining us on the show. So we're going to move it to Monday night so we don't clash with club rugby training, because I know there'll be a bunch of club rugby guys out there who will be pining for the fact that they're not being able to watch the show tonight. So John, what have you got? What's your bottle this evening?
I'm in training too. See, it's a light ginger beer.
A light ginger beer. Oh well. So I thought I would go for the Max Pacific IPA.
I see that.
The Pacific Pale Ale. So there you go.
So it's a Pacific Kappa.
It's a
Pacific Kappa.
IPA. Well, there's no IP. It's just PPA, I'm afraid. But so PPA, which is not the same.
It tastes that bad. It tastes that bad. It tastes like PP.
I was going to say, look, you have PPA, then it comes before PPE, which you put your personal protective equipment.
That's right.
Anyway, we might actually want to talk about some rugby before everyone turns off.
Yes, let's do that.
Let's do that. So we've got to say, we say sayonara to the Sunwolves, because they're going to. It's now been official that they are not going to be taking part in Super Rugby AU this year. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. there'll be on DrivingMaul.com. We'll be putting out releasing a video that I recorded today with Craig, who is from Western Australia, one of the Force fans. We have a chat about what it means for the Force fans to be included back into Super Rugby AU, and all of that side of things, and sort of obviously the pain that was caused by their and kind of how this reintegration, even if it is just for one season, is occurring. So do check that out. Stephen Harris, you're supposed to be resting, and here he is in the live chat saying tonight's challenge for the show is. What do you mean challenge? I think the challenge is to drink a beer. There we go. So some will cut from Super Rugby because the Australian government won't give them exemptions to come back into the country because they're coming from so many different locations. If they'd all been coming from Japan, they would have been allowed back into the country to take part. But because they're coming from different locations, their players are around the world. Apparently, they're not allowed back in, which let's be honest, is a real shame, isn't it, John? But I think it's been on the cards, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean they were. Let's be honest, they weren't fully embraced. That was the impression that I got from Sanzar. That right from the beginning, they were almost like the ugly stepchild, and she never transformed into the princess. There was no fairy godmother that came along and did the Cinderella job. and she's properly being kicked into touch, which is a huge loss, I think, because there was so much goodwill and growth potential for the game in Japan that could have been tapped into. But hey, let's not ever pretend that in the last 15 years Sanzar has been a model of sports administration. So let's not be surprised.
Yeah, not really surprised. But I think I read an article when we first heard about the Japan joining Super Rugby and the way they went about putting their team together for the very first season. If you looked at how Argentina did it, it was a concerted effort and plan over many years to get involved. And as soon as it was kind of inked, they were signing players, and you knew what their team was going to be. Whereas the Japan club the Japanese entry was much more of a, oh, look, there's an opportunity for us, the Japan Rugby Football Union, to get some control over our players because they're all paid for by the companies who run the teams, and we're an amateur organisation. So we'll snap up this opportunity, and then we'll figure out how we're going to do it as we go along afterwards. And I mean, they were putting their team together a couple of weeks before the season started, and all along it seemed like an opportunist grab rather than a properly planned out situation. And I think they changed coaches like 3 or 4 times in that in their short lifespan, and their teams have been totally different from one season to the next quite often. There's been some continuity early on, but this last season they were an entirely brand new team. There was no continuity from last year, and there's just been no planning and no attempts to build a franchise. It had even from the absolute start, really. So they're now officially gone. So John, if we do see, and we'll get on to talking about what 2021 looks like for Super Rugby, probably after we've looked at 2020. But can you see the Sunwolves ever coming back, or do you think that if Japan gets involved again, it'll be through the companies or through some other franchise? Is this really the end of the Sunwolves?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to answer there, Matt, because there's so many on the possibilities. There's so many branches on that logic tree of what could happen. So if you think about it, what needs to happen is they need to have a team that represents them. Oh, excuse me, that's my phone ringing in. They need to have a team that represents Japan. And the problem that they have with the teams that are currently in existence there that are playing in the Japanese league is that no one team represents the entire country. So the Jaguares represent all of Argentina, and all of Argentina is behind that team. And none of these, whether it's Panasonic or whatever it may be, that run these other rugby teams in the Japanese league, none of them want to see another team rise up and represent Japan in competition, right? So, excuse me, one moment.
Yep. You go get that. Yeah, and that is what we'll talk about the future structure, but yeah, we'll have to see how that all pans out. So
sorry, apologies for that. That was ringing in the background.
Yeah, no worries. But so yeah, we'll see what structure 2021 might take on, but there may be a way for.
So what I was trying to say is that first of all, you've got the problem of identifying a team that is supported by all of these teams in Japan, that has feed from all of these teams and can take the best players. So that's the first problem. Then the second issue that is in that logic tree is that if they decide to ever get a team to represent Japan in this kind of competition, will they want to compete with Sanzar, or will they want to align themselves with the Northern Hemisphere? So this is the issue that we face, and I have some serious concerns for the whole of Sanzar, with not only what's happened now with the Sunwolves going, but with what's happening with Jaguares, with the players being told that if they can immigrate, if they can take any opportunity elsewhere outside of Argentina, they must go for it.
Okay, let me read out the quote from a from De La Fuente, obviously one of the Jaguares players. The UAR, which is obviously the union over in Argentina, told us that if, and in brackets, a player had an offer in the future to take it to ease the economic issue a little, they told us that if we had any possibility of emigrating, that we take it, and that the URA was going to be predisposed to help us to be able to travel. Not that the URA is going to let all its players go. It will try to retain a base so that professional rugby remains in place, competing, and basically so that there's some competition within the country where they can take Jaguares, Cibos, or Argentina 15. So there you go. So basically, there's two ways of looking at this. One of these is to say that, look, the Jaguares is effectively disbanding, or the other one is just saying that, look, the Argentinian rugby union is in financial issues, unsurprisingly, as they've not had any games for Super Rugby, and there's no prospect of them, or there's very limited prospect of them playing in the Rugby Championship. Obviously, their June internationals, home internationals, are gone, so that income's all gone. So clearly, Argentina, the rugby union area, is going to be in financial distress. So they're looking at offloading some of their more expensive players, effectively, and keeping Jaguares. But obviously, they won't be as good as they were previously. The same players.
But here's the thing, and this is my concern about the administration of Sanzar's administration. They appear to be very efficient at running a competition, but their strategic decision making is really poor. So the decisions that they take, they can implement them, but the actual decisions are poor ones. So, for instance, the Jaguares were the finalists last year. They have had a meteoric rise when you consider how new they are as a franchise, and the fact that they have the greatest obstacle to overcome every season when it comes to travel. Every away game is across an ocean. Every away game they deal with jet lag, unlike the Chiefs, who drive 2 hours up the road to play against the Blues, or the Blues, who fly, I don't know, 2 hours down to the South Island to play Christchurch, whatever it may be. So they have done tremendously well. And what they needed was to be absorbed into pick one, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. They needed to be said, bring your players over, we'll quarantine them here, you can get some, negotiate some support from the Argentinian government to cover your testing, we'll make a plan, whatever, we get you into our competition, whichever one it was. And if South Africa is not opening up in time to run, then they are a team that beat the Chiefs in the last 2 years. They're a team that beat the Blues. They're the team that's done exceptionally well against all around the world. And if you want to look after the game, not just the game in our country, insert whatever country you might be in, they needed to be taken care of because they're out by themselves. They've got nobody else to play in Argentina. So, South Africa has got its situations around a lockdown that don't allow for play at the moment. But if New Zealand, you could bring them over, they could be quarantined for 2 weeks, and they could be tested. And if everything comes out right, they could be included. And they would add great flavor to, I think, Super Rugby Aotearoa. Anyway, there's It's one of my concerns about how Sanzar makes decisions.
I think you've got to remember that, and this, it's not just Sanzar. This is also World Rugby as well. But essentially, Sanzar essentially Sanzar is not an organisation. It's a group of three bodies that look after themselves. Right, we've got a group of 4 bodies with Argentina that look after themselves on the whole, and that's why this falls. And they have different priorities, and that's why it falls. And that's why any strategic decision that they make is going to be good for somebody but bad for somebody else, because they have different priorities.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, is that if rugby is strong, then everybody benefits. It's like the rising tide that lifts all ships.
Mm-hmm.
If Argentina is strong, if Argentina has a good system and is bringing through players, and there's very physical and strong athletes in Argentina that maybe are not suited little light-framed guys that play soccer, big strong guys with all that steak that they eat, and if they are playing rugby, then all around the world we benefit, because the standard of play around the world lifts. And my concern is that it's just like, let's just protect the rugby here in our country.
Oh yes, absolutely. But I'd say that's exactly what we get. We get that with Sanzar. You get the same thing with World Rugby.
I'm not naysaying you, but it's such a looking here perspective.
It is absolutely. But then you also get why does the Sanzar, also why does Super Rugby structure keep changing? One of the reasons it keeps changing is, in Australia they like derbies, in New Zealand they like derbies, and they like playing South Africa. In South Africa, they already get their derbies as part of the Curry Cup. They don't like derbies; they like games against opposition, against people from other countries, right? And so you've got 3 different views as to what kind of structure you want to have. Do you want a structure that has lots of derbies, or do you want a structure that has lots of games against foreign teams? And so every single that Sanzar makes is like that, where you've got 2 different groups pulling in different directions, trying to agree on something, and it never suits anybody.
I am very skeptical about not the truth of what you said, so far as it's coming from you, but that is what was told to us by Sanzar when they justified breaking into different conferences. And we are at a point now, because of COVID-19, all that's happened is that this slow descent that has been taking place ever since the expansion of Super Rugby and then the breaking into conferences, all that's happened is the mountain has slipped because of COVID, and it's just gone faster. But we were heading down the whole time because of the bad decisions. And what they justified to us for breaking into these conferences, they said it's because that's what we as the people wanted. And I never believed it, ever. Because I believe, and it's something that I raised with a member of Sanzar's executive committee and a head of one of the unions in a discussion, I believe their decision was based around reducing costs. Because if you add more games within a country, each one of those is far cheaper than somebody traveling across the ocean, because you fly them in the day before. So you don't have all those hotel nights for a whole, 6 hotel nights for a whole squad. You just, the day before, fly the Blues down to Christchurch to play, rather than put the Bulls up for, and all of their staff and everybody up for 6 nights in a hotel in Christchurch. So what happens then is you multiply that by game, and they have saved millions and millions of dollars in operating costs while still adding programming in the deal that they had with Sky. So they gave Sky more hours of rugby by increasing the size of the competition, and they relatively reduced their costs. And they said, "Oh, you want it." I never believed it. And it has not flown.
It works. No, absolutely. But I don't want to go over too much over old ground. But I think so. We've seen basically, New Zealand's looked after itself. Australia's trying to look after itself in the absolute mess that it is politically from a sports politics point of view. South Africa haven't got on top of the virus yet, so hence they're still in lockdown. And I think you'd see what New Zealand and Australia would do. Well, Australia would just go, look, we tried to include the Sunwolves, we were doing our bit. New Zealand would go, well, look, Argentina was part of the South Africa conference, not our conference. It's not our issue to deal with, and wash their hands of it. And then obviously South Africa's not in a position to deal with it.
Yeah.
It's not what should happen. Don't get. I'm explaining why, rather than why it's happened, rather than. But it's not a good excuse. It's a bad excuse. It should have been just like we're probably going to see the America's Cup teams from American Magic and UK Ineos, or whatever the team is called. I've gone blank now. Flying in and being here. We've got the Avatar or film crew have arrived. You're right. Just like the Warriors have headed over to Australia, the Hagley Warriors could have come here to New Zealand, and it would have, as you say, you're bringing it. It would have done that sort of thing.
If they had been turned down by the government, if they had wanted to do this and the government said, no, you cannot bring the Hagley Warriors in, it's too big, it's too large. No, I mean the Avatar crew is obviously huge, but it's just too many players, massage therapists, physios, baggage handlers. Well, it's too many players. Then we would have heard it. They would have said, look, we tried, the government kiboshed it.
No, they didn't even try, let's be honest, but they could have done.
I mean, what they could have done, if you really want to go, they could have said to South Africa, they could have said to South African teams, look, maybe we can't accommodate all of the South African teams, but maybe we can take two teams and you make a team from the Bulls and the Lions and a team between the Stormers and the Sharks, and we'll make a combined team and we'll generate tremendous interest in South Africa. And because they've got nothing to watch, they've got no South African sport to watch. So they could have done that. And if they even had the intent to do that, we would have heard of it. But there never was an intent.
No, there wasn't. And okay, so there are a couple of sports that have they have belligerently gone about it and have succeeded in getting something done. NRL, they've got themselves back up and running quicker than pretty much everyone else. UFC also. Now, you might not agree with the tactics or the way they went about it, but you've got to tip your hat. They made it happen. One of the things that I wrote an email to the organisers of the Force and Global Rapid Rugby just before the shutdown, I say, guys, look, what you want to do is get all your teams in one location and play the games. Choose.
Yeah.
I suggested Perth. In hindsight, it was a bad decision. Actually, Fiji would have been the perfect place. Imagine, hi guys, we're going to fly all your families over to Fiji for 10 weeks. You get a 10-week holiday with your family in Fiji and you play a bit of rugby. Hey, what a sales pitch. That would have been fantastic. They all get there before lockdown, lock it down, bang.
And you know what? You could stage it at whatever time suits the market. If you wanted to play it at 2:00 in the morning in Fiji, no problem. If that's what gets you the best ratings, you say, everybody, we're going on we're going to be sleeping at this diurnal rhythm, whatever it is, to get us, and the games are going to be at these times. You could have done so much, but the intent here, the desire to do what's good for the game, rather than let's protect what is ours. It's called in South Africa a lager mentality. Circle the wagons, and let's put.
So, well, not lager
really
the beer. Now, Christopher says, look, I think Super Rugby teams would have benefited by building hotels at their stadiums a long time ago to allow. Look, the problem you have there, Christopher, is that none of the Super Rugby teams own their stadiums, right? Now, in the UK, Exeter Chiefs are building a hotel next to their stadium, because you know what? That means the travelling team can stay there. They've got a conference facility, hence they can put people up there. It makes sense having hotels attached to stadiums. End of story. Now, in Hamilton, if you know Hamilton at all, you'll realise that actually the road next door to FMG Stadium is full of motels. So you effectively could have done it in Hamilton if you wanted to, quite easily. But yeah, so Chris, the problem there is that that the teams just don't own their infrastructure, and this is where Major League Rugby is going in the right direction. Is that it's trying to tell each franchise to own its stadium, because then you can do things about your stadiums. As you say, Chris, Wasps, Sale, Harlequins, they all have hotels, as the Newport Dragons. Teams. A lot of the stadiums in the UK have hotels as part of the complex. It just makes sense, and it just makes sense in those countries to own your stadium as well. The problem there, the difference is, Exeter Chiefs, for example, I'm just pulling out the hat because they're my team, but they're in a league of 12 teams, right? That means they have at a minimum, they play 21 games, so it's 11 home games straight away as part of the Gallagher Premiership. You then add in a minimum of 6 European games, so that's 17 home games. You then add in, now admittedly, these are a lower rank, so you're not going to get the same number of people, but you then have the Premiership Cup, which is another 2 home games, I think. So you're looking at something in the region of getting on towards about 20 home games a season. You compare that to the Blues. The Blues play 8 home games a season, sometimes 7, depending on the format. It's just not financially viable to own a stadium for 7 or 8 games. It's hardly financially viable for them to own a stadium for 20 games a season. For 8, it really just does not make sense, and hence why they have to have community stadiums here in New Zealand and Australia, and also in South Africa. You can't own a stadium and only use it for a couple of weekends a year.
And of course, the stadiums in South Africa are enormous. You're talking about, because many of them were developed at a time, they were developed to those sort of range of sizes at a time when South Africa was excluded from international sport, and the Currie Cup was the rugby show that was available. So the attendances were 50,000 people, no problem, for Currie Cup games.
Currie Cup was the only show in town, right?
Only show in town.
Cricket. That was it.
It's only show in town. So that's why the capacity was made when South Africa landed. Take, for instance, Kings Park. It was made to 52,000 to accommodate the 94 World Cup. Oh, that's no problem, because they'd often have sellout games there in those days, right?
Yep.
In the 80s and the 90s. And so you could fill Loftus, you could fill Ellis Park, you could fill Newlands easily with 45,000 people, 50,000 people, no problem. And so now the issue has become, because the product has been diluted, and maybe that's something we should talk about, is that if we are going to rescue Sanzar, because now it's not just about the Cub Warriors being affected, but there's talk now of South Africa, the remaining 4 teams that are in Super Rugby, leaving Super Rugby and joining the Pro 14, or at least 3 of them joining the Pro 14, because there's already 2 there, so they can only accommodate a further 3 South African teams, I read in the article. So yeah, so there's 4 South African teams, right? So we've got the Bulls.
But you're talking 2021. Let's cover off on what we do know is happening in 2020.
Okay.
I just want to, just because it's been brought up in the live chat, I want to very quickly touch on something from Major League Rugby. So Major League Rugby, they've announced a new team, or one of the new teams next season that's going to be joining is going to be called it's going to be based in LA or Los Angeles, and it's going to be called the Giltinis, which is a martini-based cocktail, premixed cocktail. Now, when the Gilgronis took over the Austin herd and became took over the Austin franchise, which again is a premixed drink, fun enough, by the same company. It was funny. It was different. It was unique. They put a lot of seriousness around how they were going to involve their youth, and it was a point of difference to every other team. When you name another team with pretty much the same name, it loses its impact and becomes a bit of a farce and a bit of a joke. It's going to make for some interesting boat races between those two teams. But apart from that, it's a crap name.
Well, I'd never heard the name before, and when you posted the comments up, I read it as guiltiness.
Guiltiness.
I read it as guiltiness, which is probably not a great name.
So
it's probably not a great name for a sports franchise. Is guiltiness.
No,
but that's what they're going to be called. They will be called guiltiness.
So there you go. So not a fan of the name. The Gilgronis, enjoyed that. I thought it was a good idea. Now you've had a second one in, it becomes a bit passé. Right, so Super Rugby Etara kicks off on the 13th of June with the Highlanders versus the Chiefs, the Blues versus the Hurricanes the following day, with the Crusaders having a bye. We then have the Chiefs versus the Blues, the Hurricanes versus Crusaders, with the Highlanders having a bye. The Blues Highlanders, Crusaders Chiefs. Then it's Highlanders, Crusaders, Chiefs, Hurricanes, Crusaders Blues, Hurricanes, Highlanders, Hurricanes.
We lost you long ago. Dude, we lost you long ago. We zoned out somewhere after the second one.
Essentially, look, 2 games a weekend at 5 p.m. on a Saturday, 3 p.m. on a Sunday. We're going to get afternoon rugby, sunshine, no dew on the ball, so it's going to be a dry ball.
Nice.
With the potential of, and with the government reviewing the option of going down to level 1 on Monday, the 8th of June. We could be at level 1 as early as Wednesday, the 10th of June, before we get to week 1. We may even have crowds at the games as well.
The big question is, Paul, are we going to have press passes?
For Super Rugby, no.
Dude, time to lift your game here, man. You're the only, we're now the only sports radio in town. Talk about the only circus available.
We can. Okay, I'll have another go, but I can. But I'll tell you, New Zealand rugby is just anal about this kind of stuff, and really does as we said.
All our listeners, everybody, email them. Say that you want us involved. You want feedback. You want reports. You want posts. You want interviews. And they must include us. So just give us some press passes so that we can cover the game.
I would love to, but look, I say I'm not going to hold my breath over this. I will try, John.
Somebody beat the Crusaders. Somebody.
So let's look at the teams then. We've got then. So we've got coming into this. The table read. The Crusaders on 23 points, 6 games, 5 wins. The Blues, 7 games, 5 wins on 22 points. The Chiefs and Hurricanes both with 4 wins and 2 losses. And then the Highlanders, 1 win, 1 draw, 4 losses. Looking at the form guide, I really can't see much having changed for the Highlanders during this COVID lockdown. Sure, they're going to play Ioane at 10 rather than at 12, but even so, look, they're going to find it tough, aren't they? This in this shortened competition.
This is going to sound crazy here, but there is something about that Highlanders team. I wish I could say to you, I could put a finger on it. I really like the look of Ioane as a 10. And of course, great service from the All Black halfback at 9. But I just get the sense that there's a sleeping giant there, a sleeping dragon, let's put it that way. That almost as if they weren't quite meshing, and maybe the extra time, maybe the opportunity to train a bit more, maybe for the linking to start taking place. Maybe we'll see something. I
guess, yes, their problem is that they have just had so much turnover in that squad. Add on to that injuries as well, and suddenly they had no outside backs, which is why Neymar Nascuda has gone down there, and why they're also looking forward to having Nariki back from the Sevens tournament side of things as well. So, look, I mean, when they lost players like they only lost Tyrrell Lomax, Jackson Hemapo, Luke Whitelock, Elliot Dixon, Liam Squire, Marty Banks, Richard Buckman, Matt Fadders, Wazaki Polo, Ben Smith. I mean, they just lost a lot of.
And the season before that, they lost Lima Sapawanga as well. So within the space of 2 seasons, that's the sort of the entire backbone of a team gone. But I cannot tell you why, but I just have a sense that there is something about the Islanders where they are the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, where they punch above their weight and they play from a place of great heart. A little bit like the Cheetahs are everybody in South Africa's second team. There's something about the plucky underdog about the Highlanders that endears them to many New Zealanders.
Yeah, there is. And look, the thing is that a lot of their players come from all over the country. Whereas you look at the Crusaders, it's all their players are from Canterbury and Tasman, right? They only had one transfer in this year that wasn't.
But originally, surely not originally, we've got a few players that have escaped Auckland or Northland or North Arthur.
Of the players, of the new players they got in last season.
The new players. Okay.
So all the new players they're bringing in have played with a lot of the players who are already on the squad, right? So they've got that sense of connectivity. They know how each other plays. If I look at the Highlanders though, Ethan Group from from Southland, Conan O'Donnell, Sunwolves, Jeff Thwaites from Bay of Plenty. You've got Will Tucker from Canterbury. You've got Tariki Ben Nicholas from Wellington. A bunch of guys from Otago. Jesse Parity from the Chiefs. Mitchell Hunt from the Crusaders. Scott Gregory from Northland. I mean, they're coming from all over.
All over.
They haven't played with each other beforehand, and that's just going to take time to do that. And I just think that with the lockdown, they've been training. That's fine, but they've not been training together to build those combinations, and hence why I think they're still going to struggle. But if you look at the rest of the teams there and how they've done, the most any team has lost is 2 games out of the other 4, right? The Crusaders won 5, as say, the Blues, and have lost 1 game. The other 3 teams, the Blues, the Chiefs, and Hurricanes, only lost 2 games in the opening set of games. It's going to be massively competitive between those 4, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, if the Highlanders have had time to work on their cohesion, you can be sure the Crusaders haven't been sitting on their backsides doing nothing. And if there's one thing you can say about the Crusaders is they are the preeminent rugby franchise in the Southern Hemisphere, without doubt. They have such a focus on excellence. They have such a focus on togetherness. Their culture is one of excellence. So they're going to be the team to beat, without question. However, having said that, what is going to be the Beauden Barrett effect on the Auckland team, on the Blues? Is he going to be able to lift them to a further level of excellence with his expectations? He's going to come in as what is now a very much established All Black and a leader in the back line, although he was shifted around to 15 last year. But that's going to be really interesting to see the effect that he has on.
You'd think at the Blues that he's in the 10 jersey. End of story. I can't see him switching back to 15 because look, the Blues.
The Blues got a really, really good 15. That's the thing. They've got a super exciting young 15 whose name escapes me. Stephen Harris. What's his name? Come on, Stephen, send it to us.
For the Blues,
Yeah.
So I mean, they've got some exciting backs. Obviously, I mean, Matt Duffy was playing there a little bit, and I wouldn't say he was exciting. You got Nara, Jordan Highland, Mark Talia, and a bunch of really exciting wingers who can play fullback. Yeah, a lot of wingers rather than necessarily actual fullback there. But Stephen Perifetta can go back to fullback and play there.
No, it's not Perifetta. It's somebody else. Come on, Stephen. Come to the fore.
Well, you got Mark Talia and Amoni Nawaya. I'm trying to think. Caleb Clark is obviously there as well. Jared Page, but he didn't play, so I'm not quite sure as to who you think of. I mean, Joe Marchant was obviously was there with TJ Fiani, Rico Iwani in the centres.
As a Pacifica player, I think in background. Tall, lanky kid.
I've named them all.
I don't know. Anyway, it will come to me. But yeah, so that's going to be the interesting one for me, to see the effect that Boden Barrett is going to have on them. And then the sleeping giant, the sort of sneaky one here is, what are the Chiefs going to do?
Yeah, I think
Chiefs look good.
The Blues and the Chiefs should push the should push the Crusaders all the way, in my opinion. Yeah, great, some wonderful players in there. Simon Hughes, you think it's Clark? Caleb Clark wasn't playing. Caleb Clark was away with the Sevens, wasn't he? So he wasn't actually playing at fullback. So I don't think it was him, Simon. But yeah, Caleb Clark, obviously, Ironi Clark's son, is there. But looking at the Chiefs, you got Quince Pyer was great backup to Anton Leonard Brown and Alex Nankivell and Tuma Manu in the centres. There, so you've got depth there. Out in the wings, you've got Solomon Almala, who's Sean Stevenson, Sean Wainui, and Sam Nicol, all playing well there. Also, Dane McKenzie, obviously at 15, with Aaron Cruden taking up the 10 jersey.
That's the thing. Aaron Cruden makes such a difference to that team.
He does.
He makes a huge difference. It's not that Damien McKenzie doesn't have the potential to be a world-class 10. He does. But at this stage, his experience and his ability to control a game and to bring his outsides into play, to unleash McKenzie, his understanding is now he's very, very special player. And I think the All Blacks are a much more dangerous beast when they have Aaron Cruden available for selection.
Yep. Now, Simon says the Hurricanes are a better sleeping giant. Now, look, my problem with the Hurricanes is who plays 10, right? I do rate Fletcher Smith, but he's raw at this level. Jackson Garden Bishop, again, pardon me, I'm not sure really is the 10 to run these guys, run around the park. When you compare that to the other teams who have got Richie Mwanga, Boden Barrett, and Aaron Cruden, the Hurricanes just do not have that 10 to lead them around the park and to run the game. TJ Perenara, love him to bits. He's a great player. He's a great ambassador off the pitch. I just don't like him being captain because he's chirpy enough when he's not captain, and once he's captain and he's actually allowed to talk to the ref, he gets even worse. But they don't. But they just lack anyone else to be captain. Really, with Ardie Surveyor being out injured, I don't know if Ardie's back or not. But yeah, to me, they just lack that number 10 to be serious contenders. The Hurricanes, they will blow some people off the park. They've got such wonderful backs. I mean, when you go Lau Mape, we go either Billy Proctor or Peter Emmanuel Jackson or Vince Arso, and then you have Houston, Ben Lam, Corbus White, Van Wyk. I mean, okay, didn't do anything in South Africa, but scored a hat trick over here on his debut. And then you put either Chase Tiete or Woody Barrett at fullback. I mean, geez, those backs will cut teams to pieces.
If I was the All Black selectors, I would insist that next season Ben Lam gets sent to the Crusade, because I think that is potentially a number one winger in the world that is just not being developed to his full potential. But that's another whole side story. Not as badly as if he was up at the Blues, but that's a different kettle of fish. Anyway,
your problem with Ben Lam is he's 28. He's too old. He's too old for a winger. His time is gone, I'm afraid.
Well, if he had been playing consecutively at 15s, maybe, but he's only been in there 2-3 years. Before that, it was all 7s. So I'm not sure. Depends on what his testing is, what is figured. But you never get any of that information from any of the sides in the world what they're testing. But the thing that concerns me about the Hurricanes is their tight five. And unfortunately, when I watch them play, the area of weakness where I saw them being targeted is back to the old Hurricanes weakness, which was their tight five. And I don't think that their tight five can live with some of the other teams in the competition.
Yeah, but they have improved their tight five. I mean, look, you got Tyrrell Lomax and Corey Reckley Stones have come in the props, which has been good. Isaiah Walker-Laurie has had more time, but it's it's that one extra. It's that little bit of depth and that one extra lock isn't quite there, is it? Let's be honest. Now, they
don't have a white lock. They don't have a Brody Retallick. They don't have a absolutely top class prop where you go, he's going to wreak havoc. You can't point and go.
But we also, I like Vaifafita, but I like him as a 6. I don't like him as a lock.
Yep.
When we see him playing a lock too often, because they just don't have enough locking depth, and that's the problem. They've got some good players. They've got 3 very good hookers in Coles, Amua, and Riccatelli, but they just don't have enough locks and enough beef at lock. In all honesty, for me, I've got the Hurricane. I've got the Highlanders coming last, the Hurricanes coming 4th, and then basically the other 3 Crusaders. Obviously, you've got to say, look, they've got the runs on the board. They've got the reputation. You've got to say they've got to be favourites. But I think the Blues and the Chiefs have the ability to unseat them and to take that top spot. I think it's going to be fascinating between those 3.
Yeah, I'd love to give you. When is the first weekend of play?
2 weekends time, 13th.
13th. I'd love to visit this again because the two things that are unresolved for me is what will the Blues look like with Barrett, and what will the Highlanders look like with more time together.
Well, neither of those you're going to find out before the first game.
No, I'm saying to revisit this after the first weekend.
Oh, yeah.
To give you a definitive answer, and then see if maybe I've been overly optimistic about the Highlanders.
I think we will find you have been, but we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait and see. Moving on then to the Australian Super Rugby AU. Now this kicks off a little bit later. John, no.
Sorry, you weren't talking about the Six Nations.
No, so
just Australian
rugby. So the Brumbies, the Rebels, the Reds, the Waratahs, and the Western Force. So let's be honest. One of the key talking points here: can the Western Force put it to the other teams and say, "Hey, you shouldn't have kicked us out"? That's one of the talking points. Now, obviously, they were all set up for Global Rapid Rugby. They lost half their squad to the Rebels when they got kicked out. So let's be honest, they don't have the depth. There's a question mark about the depth compared to the other teams. So it's going to be interesting. Let's hope they can hold their own. Let's hope they can put it to them. The Reds, we know they've lost 3 players since the season started because 3 of them will be well, three of them basically said, "Look, we're not going to play unless you pay us our full salary." They got stood down. They said, "Then you can't stand us down. We're resigning." And then Australian Rugby said, "Well, we're terminating your contract." So, yeah. So that's so three people who were expected to be part of the Wallabies over the next several years have gone. So you got to say that's got.
Give their names. Give their names again, please.
Isaac Rodder. I forgot the other two now. But I mean, Isaac Rodder was up for being the captain of the side, so it was a key player of theirs. Isaac something or other. Isaac Rodder. Isaac. I've gone blank. Anyway, scrum half and somebody else. But that's going to do one of two things to the Reds, right? Either it weakens them and they collapse. I mean, they only won 2 games anyway, last out of their 7. Pre this, or it galvanizes the team, pulls them together, and they perform more than the sum of their parts. I have just not seen that out of Brad Thorne as a coach yet. To see him do that, to me, he seems to upset players more than he does galvanize players and bring them together. So I must admit, I'm definitely down on the Reds. To be honest with you, to me this looks like a Brumbies cakewalk. To be honest,
best run organisation in Australia.
Yep, absolutely.
Has been from the start of Super Rugby.
From a playing point of view, I mean, they did have the interesting thing where they sold their training ground and rented it back for the exact same amount of money to the university. And that, there were a few. There was a bit of a fraud investigation by the police at one point. I'm not quite sure how that all panned out. So I mean, they've had their fun and games off the pitch as well, but on the pitch, yes, they've been the best organised Super Rugby side the whole time, as you say. So look, then the Rebels. I mean, the Waratahs only won 1 game out of 5 before this. So look, they've got the cattle. They should be performing way better than that. And you would hope under their new coach, he would have had some time to sort things out. So I expect the Waratahs to step up. And we're just going to see can the Force do a couple of bloody noses. Now, go on then, John. You said 3 sides were looking forwards to 2021. Then, if we say that Super Rugby turns into, we keep Super Rugby Aotearoa, we keep Super Rugby AU, we set up Super Rugby Japan, and the top 2 sides from the top league, Super Rugby Aotearoa, Super Rugby Australia, have some sort of playoff and finals, and it excludes South Africa. South Africa go north. You said 3 teams could go to join the Pro 14.
They can't absorb. This is what I read in the article. They can't absorb another 4 South African teams. They only can absorb an additional 3. That doesn't mean that the 2 that are already there keep their place. I'm just saying they can take a total of 5 South African teams, not 6.
That seems strange because at the moment it's the Pro 14, right, with 2 conferences of 7. So to take on an extra 3 to make it 17 teams, how do you structure a tournament with 17 teams?
I don't know. I was having a look at the stuff for tonight, and I just very quickly did it. And there was a statement there about not being able to take all the teams. So I was just doing some prep. So, but be that as it may,
John was doing some prep. My word.
Don't say it too loud. You raise the expectations for the next whenever. The thing that concerns me is I don't see how Australian rugby makes it through at the kind of level it needs to compete internationally if there's no South Africa in Super Rugby. Because the major source of income, even though the South African rand is so undervalued compared to its true buying power, the major source of revenue was coming from South Africa because of a 55 now million strong population and what they could sell the advertising revenues for. And this is why games were being played in the evenings in Australia and New Zealand in order to get maximum possible viewership in South Africa, so that the matches in South Africa were appearing. New Zealand matches were appearing at around 8:30, depending on which, daylight saving, either 8:30 or 9:30 in the morning. And then Australian games were at 11:30 and 12:30, depending where they were in Australia during the day. So yeah, I don't know how Australia comes out of it. New Zealand is so passionate about rugby, they keep going. But overall, I think South Africa doesn't benefit. I think South Africa's rugby is stronger playing against New Zealand and Australian teams, especially New Zealand teams. But even Australian teams, there's a lot of rugby nous and way that the game is approached with handling wise that South Africa benefit from coming up against and playing in the Northern Hemisphere against the Pro 14 teams. I don't think that sets the Springboks up for success. I don't think it sets the loss of Dan Carter, I think, that said one of the reasons why the All Blacks did so well in his time as an All Black, did so well in matches in South Africa is because they've got to play there regularly. And I don't think it benefits the All Blacks when it comes to playing in.
And we've lost John. Unfortunately, his connection has dropped out, which is a real shame. So we lost you there, John. Yeah, but no, you're right. One of the things I was talking about on the show that will come out tomorrow morning was that the reason that New Zealand wants to have South Africa in tournaments isn't for the fans. The fans don't really care about games at 3 o'clock in the morning, to be honest with you, and they enjoy when the Stormers or the Sharks come over here, fine. But they're much more interested in the derbies. From a coaching and a player's point of view, that's getting used to the different pitches in South Africa, getting used to the travel and staying in hotels, getting used to that touring mentality. It's all a stepping stone. Then they do the November tours. They get get used to again traveling and doing your 3 to 4 week trips, and then you go to the Rugby World Cup where you get used to where you have to do your 6 to 8 or 8 week trips. So it's all these stepping stones that building up towards the Rugby World Cup. A 2-week tour to Africa, then a 3 to 4 week tour to Europe, and then an 8-week Rugby World Cup. The harder pitches in South Africa, different style of rugby, playing at altitude, being able to adapt to different conditions compared to the conditions here in New Zealand, adapt to different conditions, wetter conditions, quite often, or muddier conditions in Europe if it's depending on weather in November. Again, makes you a more rounded rugby player. It all adds to those extra skills, makes them better players. Whereas some of the South African teams just never. Their tours are longer. It's a 4 to 5 week tour rather than a 2-week tour at Super Rugby level. So it's a harder jump to do. Also, I think there's perhaps a bit more of a culture shock. I mean, we talked with your South African, Warren Brosnan. He's talking about how basically. So a lot of the players, I mean, obviously, Afrikaans is heavily their first language, and English isn't. So it's it's a bigger culture shock to them.
Remember, it's not just the Afrikaans players; it's the Xhosa and the coloured players are also Afrikaans speaking. They haven't done a lot of travelling outside of South Africa. There's not a lot of expendable income.
When you're English speaking. Your English-speaking Kiwis and Australians fly to South Africa, they can get away with English, right? It's not. It's a much easier culture.
I've come across more people who cannot speak English in Hamilton than I have in Durban.
Yeah. So the South African teams haven't adapted to this travel as well. Perhaps haven't used it as a learning tool in the same way that the New Zealand sides have either. Now, we're coming up to the hour mark, so we'll look forward to 2021 more properly next week, and when we'll look at that in more detail. But that's what 2020 is looking like. I don't think we're going to get. I don't think South Africa's going to sort themselves out to probably have enough time to put in a Super Rugby competition. I think they'll just look at doing the Curry Cup if they do. And there's still talk of potentially having the rugby championship in Australia with the 4 teams, which would be fantastic. But we'll see if that gets off the ground. But I think from a South Africa point of view, I think Curry Cup is what they'll be looking at trying to get done this season, if they can.
I mean, what I just, it's an overused statement. I can't wait. It's so overused, but it's so valid when I think about the world champions playing the All Blacks. That is going to be tasty.
So thank you, everybody. Don't forget, next week we'll be coming to the DrivingMaul Show. Will be coming to you on Monday night at 8 p.m, not on Tuesday night. At Tuesday night at 8 p.m, we'll be having Do You Know Sports? The number one sports quiz on New Zealand radio, the only sports quiz on New Zealand radio. We'll be taking part on next Tuesday. Tomorrow night at 8 p.m, we will have our very first rugby league show. We haven't named it yet, so if you've got any good names for rugby league show, then please do drop them in the chat and let me know. And then obviously on Thursday, we have Swinging from the Hip at 8 p.m. Once Super Rugby starts, myself and Shane will be bringing you a preview of every weekend on a Friday evening, and we'll be looking at doing a roundup on Sunday evening as well. So look, folks, lots and lots of content coming to you here on the New Zealand Sports Radio. Share it with your friends, let them all know. So we'll be having we'll be having that, and we have a good name for we need to get a good name for the League One. So RB6 again, he says, would be a name for it. Yes, maybe that would be it. But we'll have to. I'll have to see what the boys think. But we'll try and get that together. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. Thank you, John, for joining me. And don't forget, next week, Monday night, for the DrivingMaul Show.